Somewhere in Southern California, more than 700 pieces of art sit piled high inside a top-secret warehouse. They appear to be signed works by Picasso, Chagall, Dali, Miro, Rembrandt, all waiting to be sold live on the Fine Art Treasures Gallery televised auction.
I've got a bid at 100, I've got 200, I've got 300.
Their whole point was just to get the artwork on the air, get these auctioneers on the air, and push the bids across the screen and move on to the next one as quick as possible.
This next piece is called Venus with Drawers, a very, very famous image of Salvador Dali. He actually later on created a sculpture about this piece as well. Wonderful, very colorful piece. It's signed and it's an artist proof, ladies and gentlemen, so good luck.
Bidding starts at a fraction of the artwork's actual value.
This should be going for 10 times this amount. But hey, it's your auction. 910 going once, 950.
It's an opportunity for every middle-class art lover, not just the upper crust, to invest in their very own masterwork.
Anytime you have a piece of art that starts off bidding at $1,000 that you're being told is worth $80,000 on the open market, that's too good to be true.
But for the nearly 10,000 bidders who think they're getting the deal of the century, their impression of Fine Art Treasures Gallery is dead wrong.
There are a lot of people who are sitting at home in their living room looking at a fake piece of art and they don't even know it.
25, and this awesome piece is gone.
Fine Art Treasures Gallery is the magnum opus of Christine Eubanks, a serial entrepreneur based in Los Angeles. But long before the televised auction, Eubanks is just another yuppie hoping to make it big in showbiz.
Everyone described her as being somebody who was fairly intelligent. We heard things like she had an Ivy League education.
Eubanks grows up in Chicago, and after college, she moves to New York City to work for a movie studio's distribution arm.
She was always a competitive salesperson, at least the way she described it to me. She loved listening to the song Brick House in her car before she'd go to a sales meeting at that job.
The competitive saleswoman soon moves to Los Angeles, where she makes a turn from the movie business to fine art.
Christine would engage in fine art photography as a hobby, and she would meet other fine art photographers and learn about other techniques and skills. And somewhere down the line, she decided, okay, then let's make a business out of it.
Former Assistant U.S. Attorney David Willingham says she and her husband, Gerald Sullivan, opened Finer Image Editions, an art reproduction studio in 1995.
She wore the pants in the family. She really controlled the business, and she really was the one in charge of every aspect of it. And he, Mr. Sullivan, ran the details, ran the accounts, handled the transactions.
The business sells reproduced artwork to clients like Princess Cruise Lines.
Princess Cruise Lines bought art from Finer Image Edition and sold them to people who were just, having fun with themselves or their families on cruises.
These are big accounts, and Eubanks is thrilled with the demand for the reproductions. Demand that's becoming easier to meet thanks to new technology, like the state-of-the-art Giclée printer. By 2000, Eubanks' Finer Image Editions is one of only a handful of businesses using the Giclée to reprint artwork. And Eubanks markets it to the hilt, seeking artists who would like to reproduce their work.
Finer Image had run an ad in the Art Business News, which is a very big magazine for the industry, about this new process and about how they were printing this new Giclée, lifelike images.
The Giclée technology catches the attention of 49-year-old artist John O'Brien, a rising painter who dreams of becoming a superstar.
This used to be John's art studio, where he spent 7 days a week painting.
O'Brien is having modest success with his Irish landscapes and Parisian street scenes, and the City of Light holds special significance for him and his wife, Martha.
I met him in the summer of 1989 in Paris on a houseboat underneath the Eiffel Tower. It was just one of those moments that you never expected, and he wasn't either. It was just magical.
Martha, a ballet instructor, and her new husband barely eke out a living.
We were living not month to month, but it was tight. We were living comfortable, but it was tight.
O'Brien soon catches a break when he lands an agent, and it's not long before licensing companies come calling. Soon, his work begins to appear on puzzles, wall plaques, even oven mitts.
Things started picking up, and all of a sudden John was making money and he was getting recognized, and his artwork was getting into some very prominent homes.
Poster companies also approach O'Brien, but he's deathly afraid of losing control.
The puzzles he thought is a wonderful way to get his name out there and to get people interested in his work, and then maybe go to the website to buy an original painting or an authentic reproduction. But he didn't like the idea of his work being cheapened.
Eubanks knows that control is everything to an artist, and O'Brien is no exception. So she draws up an irresistible offer. O'Brien will custom order reproductions directly from Finer Image Editions, and Christine Eubanks will faithfully manufacture them.
The light had come on, that this was now what we had been waiting for, a sign that things were going to turn around, that life was good.
Eubanks preys on O'Brien's artistic sensibility and gains his trust by saying quality is most important in the reproduction process. All he has to do is hand over an original.
And then this is just a sample that they showed him on a little piece of canvas to get his approval of how brilliant the color is, what it would feel like, the thickness of the canvas, the quality of the canvas. He was blown away because his work is so detailed and he's all about color. And he couldn't believe that the colors just jumped right out so brilliantly.
O'Brien takes the deal, and Christine Eubanks now has unlimited access to John O'Brien's original work, and she's seeing dollar signs in the reproductions.
Instead of just custom ordering for John, they wanted to be on the other end of it, which is let us go ahead and mass produce your work, and we'll sell it, and we'll pay you a royalty or a signature fee for every piece that you sign for us.
Eubanks promises O'Brien will join the big leagues and be in the company of millionaire artists like Thomas Kincaid.
That was like, okay, here's our ticket into that circle, and get his name out there big time, get full-page ads at Art Business News, and attract the collector who would pay $60,000 for one of John's paintings.
But the initial euphoria fades when over the next year, Eubanks's promises prove worthless.
I found these old letters that were written by Christine Eubanks just to all artists. Together, we will be the best ever. We never saw a penny that year.
Far from joining the big leagues, the O'Briens struggle to make ends meet, and they decide to sell some of John's pieces on eBay. But when they log in, they can't believe what they see.
And so then we would go to eBay just to see what other artists were doing and to see what was on there, and that's when we discovered that somebody else had already put one of his pieces of artwork up for sale on eBay. And then there became more and more of them kept popping up. Posters, prints.
To their horror, unauthorized knockoffs of O'Brien's work have flooded the market.
I think we were both just in shock. I mean, just totally like, how did this happen? And then it just started happening on a regular basis.
The O'Briens ordered a piece to try to get some answers.
And then we got ourselves a nice print of John's work. What was the shocker was the certificate of authenticity signed not by the artist, which is what the agreement has always been, that John would sign each one approving the piece and then also signing the Chagall, but then his forged signature on the piece itself.
The O'Briens know there's only one person who could be responsible for the forgeries because only one person had access to the originals, Christine Eubanks.
It was such easy money. It's just like counterfeiting money. I mean, you've got a printer, you type in 100 and push the button print, you've got 100 images.
Unfortunately, he trusted in the wrong person. Christine Eubanks fooled him like she fooled everybody else and took those images and stole them in order to sell them on the market.
But the damage is more widespread than the O'Briens realize. Unbeknownst to them, Eubanks is selling unauthorized copies of O'Brien's work to corporate clients like Princess Cruise Lines. O'Brien soon cuts ties with Eubanks, and he struggles to regain control of his work and support his family of four. Martha O'Brien's father comes to their aid and invests in a pricey Chagall printer
John realized that he was going to have to do it all himself, that he wasn't going to go into business with anybody else. He wasn't going to send his transparencies out to anybody else. He was going to do everything in-house.
But despite his best efforts, O'Brien's biggest fear has already come true.
He was furious. And he felt really, I don't want to say stupid, but why didn't we try harder to prevent this from happening? That question of what did we do wrong that this could happen, because that was his biggest fear, is to lose control of that.
So far, Christine Eubanks has successfully scammed artist John O'Brien. But she knows she'll make millions more if she can somehow con the art buyers themselves. In 2002, Eubanks and her husband, Gerald Sullivan, meet a fast-talking auctioneer named Jimmy Mobley, an ex-con with a drug problem.
He had had a lot of exposure to art dealers prior to that, and not of the most savory kind, I guess.
Together, they hatch a diabolical plan to sell massive quantities of bogus and unauthorized art on live TV.
He introduced her to a lot of these people who would sell art and help her get it reproduced, for example. In exchange for that, and also for being the auctioneer, he was supposed to get a cut of what came in through the television show.
They give the show a seemingly legitimate name, Fine Art Treasures Gallery. And they know that broadcasting on the Dish Network and DirecTV will make the show seem even more credible.
When you do something on TV, people want to believe, and in fact they do believe, that it's real. So there's no other better way to hide your scam other than doing it out and in the open.
The stakes are high for Christine Eubanks, who spends at least $50,000 to produce 11 hours of airtime every weekend.
The business model was, whether it's just a dozen people watching or 2,000 people watching, the real value of the show was, are we able to sell?
They're making tons of money, but they had to put that money back into the scheme to keep it going.
Next on American Greed.
See, we're going to start the bidding right now, Ken.
Fine Art Treasures Gallery is a tour de force, but buyer beware.
$355 I have going once, $355 going twice. Sold at $355.
Wow, this is really unbelievable.
In September 2002, Christine Eubanks broadcasts her first episode of Fine Art Treasures Gallery. Sexy women and silver-tongued auctioneers move the merchandise, but watch closely. They're no art experts.
You may remember Norman Rockwell from his Saturday Night Evening Post magazine covers.
Viewers are led to believe that the lots are authentic artwork by the original artists, which they say come from estate liquidation sales. Amazingly, Fine Art Treasures Gallery even sells multiple prints from the same series of very rare, limited editions.
The chances of a legitimate dealer or any dealer having two actual and authentic rare pieces of the same series, slim to none. That just doesn't happen in the real world.
Despite these red flags, the calls come pouring in. It's music to Christine Eubanks' ears, though sometimes even the calls are fake. A little trick devised by auctioneer Jimmy Mobley.
Mr. Mobley would use his cell phone and he would hit the ringing sound near a mic so that it would sound like people were calling in the show.
I'd love to see the phone ring again. Anybody out there?
And there's another funny thing about the auction. Everyone's a winner.
If they had two normal people bidding, they would tell both of them that they actually won the auction and basically print off another piece in order to sell two pieces.
Congratulations to you on that.
Once a bidder's payment is processed, Fine Art Treasures ships the merchandise.
You had people who were just completely unsophisticated in their knowledge of the art world, getting what should have been an $80,000 piece of artwork shipped to them essentially in a cardboard box.
While Fine Art Treasures Gallery takes off, John and Martha O'Brien are still battling Christine Eubanks to get the money they're owed. But the couple soon learns they have an even more desperate fight on their hands.
He started getting headaches, really bad headaches. So he was having a hard time painting. And so he would go to doctors, and the doctors would say things like, well, it's eye strain.
In April 2004, John O'Brien's doctor tells the O'Briens the devastating news. It's melanoma. he has cancer.
Ted finally had a complete body scan, and we'd found that it metastasized everywhere in his body, so it was terminal. Everything just came to a screeching halt. At this point, he had no agent. We had the licensing that was ongoing, so we had the royalty checks, but really all we were doing was just fighting for his life.
John O'Brien succumbs to cancer just 6 months after his diagnosis. He dies the very same day as his daughter's 6th birthday.
I remember just lying next to him in our bed and holding his hand and letting him know that it was okay to go, because I knew that he was fighting really, really hard, and he died shortly after that.
And as Martha O'Brien suffers the greatest loss of her life, Christine Eubanks is just raking it in.
Sold! Sold! Sold!
Fine Art Treasures Gallery grosses between $100,000 and $250,000 each broadcast. But Eubanks and her husband don't spend lavishly. Rather, they live in a modest ranch-style home in the low-key Los Angeles suburb of La Cañada Flintridge. In fact, Eubanks has to work so hard to keep the scam going that the volume of business is too much for her to handle. So she hires Rona Lopez as her new office operations manager.
I felt rejuvenated being in there, like, wow, this is a real art place and a real studio, and there are all these people working.
It's not long before Lopez is producing the televised auction. She organizes the artwork and handles customer complaints.
They'd say, oh, it was late. Oh, the frame was chipped. Explain to me the certificate of authenticity, or I refuse delivery. A good portion of what we did in the office was trying to resolve these issues.
Christine Eubanks, a true master of spin, paints some pretty artful explanations.
Someone had claimed that they received a Chagall, and Chagall had misspelled his name. They immediately called back to Fine Art Treasures Gallery asking, hey, Chagall misspelled his name, and they had convinced this victim. That happens once in a while with the artists, and you actually have a more rare item than you had before, and your deal was even a better deal than you actually got, because only a few pieces, are there out there where they misspell their own names, and the person bought it.
Though business is booming, customer service is becoming a real thorn in Eubanks' side.
She would always tell me that she was barely making a profit, and I took her word for it that yeah, this is an expensive business. She would say, this is why I have to fight very hard these credit card complaints.
And fight she did, especially when customers would come to the office looking for a refund.
In one case, she grabbed one person, threw them out of the business. In another instance, the man turned around and she kicked him in the rear. All of this sort of fit into what we were hearing, that she was very aggressive.
One of our victims, he tried to return some art to the premises. Christine Eubanks simply locked him out, shut the door on him, and wouldn't take the art back.
In late 2004, Special Agent Christopher Calarco with the FBI's newly created art crime team gets several calls about Fine Art Treasures Gallery.
A couple people had complained that they had bought a piece of art for a couple $1,000s, and then later learned that it was fake.
Agent Calarco also learns that Fine Art Treasures Gallery reaches more than 25 million households across the country.
There was a lot of fake art that was circulating in the art market. It wasn't like it was something I'd never heard before, but this was the first time I'd heard about a TV show that was selling the art.
Calarco knows that every weekend that goes by, hundreds of unsuspecting people could be victimized in their very own living rooms. Coming up, the feds tune in to Fine Art Treasures Gallery, and questions emerge.
Is this a $2 million fraud, $10 million fraud? What are we dealing with here?
By late 2004, the televised art auction Fine Art Treasures Gallery has been on the air for more than a year. It's bringing in millions of dollars for its owner, Christine Eubanks. But FBI Special Agent Christopher Calarco believes the auction is nothing more than an infomercial for fraudulent art, and he launches an investigation.
When I started kind of getting an idea of the potential scope of the fraud and how many victims and how much loss there could be, the case took on a sense of urgency.
Agent Calarco does some digging, and he finds that the Better Business Bureau has given Fine Art Treasures Gallery an F rating because of customer complaints. And when he finally sees the show,
we were blown away at what we were seeing.
Here, we are now moving into our Marc Chagall segment.
The way the auction looked, it didn't feel right.
He loved the circus, he loved lovers.
The way the auctioneer was calling out the bids.
Well, 200 I have.
There seemed to be something going on. It didn't seem legitimate.
300, Sally also, thank you.
You're watching it, and it almost felt grimy, dirty. I would be very careful about ever wanting to give my credit card up to these people.
401 going once, 401 going twice. Sold.
Agent Calarco's first call is to Detective Don Harissig with the Los Angeles Police Department.
I am the art cop for the city of LA.
Detective Harissig has been working art fraud cases for more than 20 years, and Fine Art Treasures Gallery is already on his radar.
I thought it was hokey, but I could see its potential for grabbing an uninformed buyer out there to give them a taste of owning something that may have been signed by the hand of a modern-day master.
Detective Harissig knows that the intent to defraud can be difficult to prove, so the team makes undercover buys on the air.
We need to know more than somebody was sold a fake artwork. We need to be able to show that this business is consciously doing that. They aren't just getting something from a supplier and they don't know anything about the supplier and that they're just a middle person.
Going once, going 3 times, sold.
Well, if someone says this was hand-signed, everyone's going to assume that it was hand-signed by the artist, but someone could always fall back on the fact that, oh, we didn't say it was signed by Picasso or Chagall. We would ask questions like, did Picasso really sign that? Yes, Picasso signed the painting. So clarifying those type of misrepresentations, because people can kind of wiggle around using words to protect themselves.
Detective Harissig then takes the pieces to experts like Brentwood gallerist Leslie Sachs.
This is an example of an image that was offered to me of a Picasso oil, and I looked at the photograph in the book, matched up the details exactly, and came to a determination that some of the details were not exactly corresponding. The problematic work has a full stop between the 2 and the 5 in the date, whereas here it's not visible as a separation.
Investigators know they're dealing with a genuine fraud, but they don't know who's running the show. So Agent Calarco goes undercover to canvass Fine Art Treasures Van Nuys office. It's a shrewd investigative move that really pays off.
I was doing some poking around at the businesses. I was just in the area and walking around, talking to some of the employees, just acting like I was looking for another address and chatting them up about the business. And at one point, I actually bumped into Christine Eubanks, who was in the warehouse standing over what appeared to be some type of print. I was asking her for directions, and really I was looking around to see kind of what I could see. It looked like she may have been signing something at the bottom of the print.
It's one thing to have the word of people who were otherwise involved in the scheme, but it's another thing to have the investigating agent just walk in and watch her do it herself.
And the team's findings are confirmed when they get a tip from an insider, a bookkeeper at Fine Art Treasures Gallery.
She told us everything we needed to know about how the fake scheme worked internally. The fact that they were buying fake art from several places within the country. That they were also printing off large amounts of fake art that they would then ship to the TV studios where they would then sell them live at the auction.
I've got an opening bid at $1,000.
And while investigators race to gather enough evidence to make the case, the show goes on.
Okay, here we go.
Dozens of fake Picassos, Chagalls, and Dalis hit the airways.
Some people want this piece.
And the prices keep going up.
I am up to $4,500 on a piece that would sell in a gallery for thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars more because it's pencil signed.
And with each broadcast, more bidders fall victim. Like Myron Temchin, a successful engineer and art lover.
We were in a hotel and we're watching the TV, and here comes this art auction.
There isn't a lot around these days except people.
With its artful presentation, it's easy to see how even savvy collectors like Temchin might get caught up in a bidding sequence like this.
Ladies and gentlemen, I think you might want to get in on the bidding. A hand-signed Picasso piece.
Here comes all of these Picassos, the signed lithos, and so we start thinking, well, maybe we should bid and see what happens.
You don't want to pass this up. This is like money in the bank.
The dollars are going up and the dollars are going up.
$5,200, $5,300, $5,400. I've got $6,000.
The clock is running out.
You want to let it go for $6,000? Then we'll let it go.
She says, do you want to put in one final bid?
10 seconds to go.
And we say yes.
6,000 going twice. Sold for $6,000.
Wow, that is just fabulous. Congratulations on that once-in-a-lithime win.
I won this bid, and I say, let me just make sure I understand what this is. This is a legitimate lithograph. Yes, it's signed by Picasso himself. Yes, it's an original signature from Picasso. Yes, there's a certificate of authenticity from a recognized art dealer. Yes.
Congratulations to you.
At just $2,010, Temchin thinks he's getting a real steal.
I think we were excited to think that we could have a lithograph from Picasso, and then it would be something I think we thought we could, pass down through the family.
Temchin gets so caught up in the action that he actually bids on and wins a second Picasso for $2,050.
I've got $2,500.
The bid taker tells Temchin the pieces will be shipped via FedEx to arrive on December 1st, 2005.
The box shows up, and my wife calls me and says, we've got the first Picasso, and it looks like a Xerox copy of a piece of work done by Picasso in a semi-fancy frame.
And the certificate of authenticity?
Wasn't framed, it wasn't in color, it had no seal on it. It was just something somebody hand-scribbled together.
The certificate also reveals that the lithograph Temchin thought he purchased is really something called a verso.
Evidently, a verso is the front side, the left side or the right side of a page in a book. And I think we probably have nicer copies of Picasso's in the books in our own art library.
Myron Temchin knows he's been fooled, and like any disgruntled customer, he sets out to get his money back.
I have their mailing receipt, I have an address, I'm gonna go to the office, I'm gonna bring them back the art and say, give me back my money.
If only it were that easy. The office address is a short 8-mile drive from Temchin's home, but when he gets there, something's not right.
I can't find the address because the address turns out to be a mailbox in one of these walk-in mail stores. So there is no company, there is no address, there's a standard answering machine that just runs and takes messages, and probably nobody responds.
Temchin scours his receipts for other contact information, and he finds a number for Christine Eubank's other company, the art reproduction business Finer Image Editions.
The answering machine voice for this other company is the same voice of the answering machine for the auction house. I looked them up on the internet, and it turns out that these guys make what they call museum quality Ziclés. So they are a fancy copy store.
Temchin drives to the Van Nuys office, but that too is a dead end.
I couldn't get any response from anybody. We don't know anything about this auction. All we do is make these prints and sell them to whoever wants to buy them.
Timchin is more determined than ever to bring these scammers to justice, and he leaves word for Special Agent Christopher Calarco at the FBI.
About a week later, we get a phone call. The agent, Chris, says, I'd like to come over and talk to you. I'd like to look at the art.
It was very shortly after meeting them, I realized that they could be trusted, and I asked for their discretion, and they guaranteed it to me. And they let me take their art. We used their art as one of the pieces that we took to experts to verify that it was fake.
By 2006, Fine Art Treasures Gallery is more successful than ever, and the competitor in Christine Eubanks pushes hard to keep the scam going, micromanaging every aspect of the production.
I heard from witnesses and people that worked there that she was a very intimidating person. Many people claim to be afraid of her.
She's somebody that lives inside her own specious logic. She comes up with her own sort of idea of what's right and wrong and how she can justify these things in her mind. She's a sociopath.
In August, Eubanks hires television director Pat Cardamone to take the helm. Cardamone has no idea what he's getting himself into.
There weren't enough people in the control room to do the job, and I'm not really that technical a guy, but the job really involved doing the jobs of about 4 or 5 different people that are generally involved in production.
And with Eubanks in control, the production seems more like controlled chaos.
This next piece,
$100, I'm looking. I've got a bid at
Lady and the
$125
Tramp.
already. $125. Start the clock, please.
Sometimes I'm too busy coloring the cameras to be able to hear what the auctioneer is saying. They ask for the clock, and I don't put the clock up.
Put that clock on. Let's go.
Christine would run back and forth between the control room and the sound stage. At some points, I could hear her yelling over my headsets, and I knew it was getting on the air.
This is the
And it was either because there was something going wrong on the phones, or that they were putting the wrong artwork up, or they couldn't find the next piece that was supposed to go up, or because I was doing something wrong.
But as he becomes more comfortable in the control room, Cardamone suspects that things aren't what they seem.
It did cross my mind towards the end that they might be printing up some of the stuff that we're selling. And I asked her what estate sign meant at one point, and she said, that means that somebody is authorized by the author's estate to sign these paintings and to authenticate them. I didn't know that she was the one that was signing the paintings.
By September 2006, investigators have gathered dozens of pieces of fake artwork and certificates of authenticity, and they found nearly $4 million in Eubanks' personal accounts.
When the personal investment accounts were located, and there were significant assets that were directly traceable to the crimes themselves, then it was just a matter of putting that on paper and getting a judge to sign off on the warrant.
The team finally has enough evidence to secure search warrants for Christine Eubanks' house and her businesses.
Right around the time of the takedown in this case, it appeared that the business was operating more efficiently than it ever had.
Wow, what a fabulous deal. Next up.
Next on American Greed, investigators pulled the plug on Fine Art Treasures Gallery.
That pursuit of money, that greed, creates a fog in people where they just don't care because all they want is as much money as they can get, and that's when people make mistakes, and that's where we strike.
September 7th, 2006, Southern California. More than 60 law enforcement officers await their cue to execute search warrants on Christine Eubanks' house, her office, and the Fine Art Treasures Gallery studio.
We had to wait to serve the search warrants because at the same time we were serving the search warrants, we were also serving seizure warrants to freeze bank accounts all throughout the country.
Once agents successfully freeze those accounts, the team moves in on Eubanks' office.
When we came in, people were very shocked and scared. Not everybody was real cooperative right away. I immediately found Christine Eubanks, and she was working at the time.
True to form, Eubanks is standoffish, and she lies to Agent Calarco.
Christine Eubanks originally said that she was not the owner-operator, that she was just an employee. When I asked her to identify who the owner was, she was evasive and wasn't cooperating.
Eubanks is handcuffed just as Rona Lopez arrives for work.
When I got inside, it was kind of like a real mess. They were leading Christine out in handcuffs. I tried to look her in the eye. She wouldn't look me in the eye. And, it was just all a shock.
Meanwhile, investigators begin the daunting task of sifting through mountains of evidence.
We found all the records of the business. We found all the accounting records, where some of the art was being purchased from. We found evidence of certain art that they were making on scene, pieces of paper where people were practicing signing artists' names. And so you could tell that somebody had been working on it.
The team works overnight to catalog more than 700 pieces of fraudulent artwork and certificates of authenticity.
We had to set up an assembly line where we're taking pictures of each artwork, and it went on hour after hour after hour.
The goods are hauled off to this FBI asset forfeiture warehouse.
Some pieces will be kept as evidence later for other cases, as good examples of fraudulent art. But most of it will actually end up being destroyed because we don't want this ever to hit the marketplace, and we don't want any more victims to be generated as a result of this television show.
Christine Eubanks' own husband, Gerald Sullivan, and their former partner, Jimmy Mobley, turn against her and cooperate with the government. In March 2007, Sullivan pleads guilty to several conspiracy charges, including wire fraud. He's sentenced to 4 years in prison. Mobley pleads guilty to felony conspiracy charges. He gets 5 years. And in April 2007, Eubanks pleads guilty to conspiracy to commit mail fraud, wire fraud, interstate transportation of stolen property, and filing a false income tax return. She's sentenced to 7 years in prison. In all, the scam brings in more than $20 million from more than 10,000 victims across the country.
We cut the head off the snake. Just putting Christine Eubanks in jail couldn't really stop the type of conduct that was going on, but what it could do was drastically reduce the market for where those suppliers of fake art could sell their wares.
Once DirecTV and Dish Network learned of the scam, they pulled the show off the air. Dish Network declined to comment, but DirecTV says, "This programming was brought to us by a third-party broker. This was an extremely rare case. We do our best to protect our customers by insisting that companies representing paid programmers affirm that the producers will conduct their business in an honest and legal manner before we agree to carry their programming." The government seizes nearly $4 million from bank accounts controlled by Eubanks and Sullivan.
They had a nice house in a nice neighborhood, but it wasn't Beverly Hills, and it certainly wasn't a mansion. They were saving up for a rainy day, it looks like, when they were going to call it quits.
Director Pat Cardamone still lists Fine Art Treasures Gallery as a credit on his resume. Today, he directs televised mass services at his Pasadena Catholic Church.
Working here is my penance. I enjoy working with good people. I enjoy working with honest people. And I'm much more comfortable working on that side of the law than working with Christine.
Myron Temchin never got a real Picasso, but he is ultimately made whole after losing more than $4,000.
I think there's a part of us that are dreamers, and we're looking for something good to happen to us, for our family. So some of us take the risk and some don't. I took the risk and got scammed.
Since artist John O'Brien's death, his widow Martha has struggled to regain control of her husband's work.
I was dealing with motions, and hearings and depositions and responses, and find this document and find that document, and running to lawyer's office. At one point in time, I had 10 lawyers in my life. 10.
O'Brien was part of a lawsuit against Princess Cruise Lines, which issued this statement. We contacted all purchasers of the art to disclose there was a dispute on authorization of the print edition they purchased, which may involve their particular piece, and we offered refunds if the purchasers wished to return the art. She is no longer part of the suit. The fight against Eubanks becomes too much for O'Brien to handle. Now she spends her time authenticating her husband's work.
They opened the door, and then once the marketplace was tainted with the fraud art, and then things became easy to do on the internet, I think they just paved the way. And they set an example to show how easy it was. To this day, I feel like I'm still fighting for his life in a different way, but I'm fighting to keep the legacy true. If I don't make it right now, my girls will grow up and their dad's art will go by the wayside, and what could have been the dream that he had will never happen.
Sullivan opened Finer Image Editions, an art reproduction studio in 1995.
She wore the pants in the family. She really controlled the business, and she really was the one in charge of every aspect of it. And he, Mr. Sullivan, ran the details, ran the accounts, handled the transactions.
The business sells reproduced artwork to clients like Princess Cruise Lines.
Princess Cruise Lines bought art from Finer Image Edition and sold them to people who were just, having fun with themselves or their families on cruises.
These are big accounts, and Eubanks is thrilled with the demand for the reproductions. Demand that's becoming easier to meet thanks to new technology, like the state-of-the-art Chagall printer. By 2000, Eubanks' Finer Image Editions is one of only a handful of businesses using the Chagall to reprint artwork. And Eubanks markets it to the hilt, seeking artists who would like to reproduce their work.
Finer Image had run an ad in the Art Business News, which is a very big magazine for the industry, about this new process and about how they were printing this new Chagall lifelike images.
The Chagall technology catches the attention of 49-year-old artist John O'Brien, a rising painter who dreams of becoming a superstar.
This used to be John's art studio, where he spent 7 days.
Somewhere in Southern California, more than 700 pieces of art sit piled high inside a top-secret warehouse. They appear to be signed works by Picasso, Chagall, Dali, Rembrandt, all waiting to be sold live on the Fine Art Treasures Gallery televised auction.
I've got a bid at 100, I've got 200, I've got 300.
Their whole point was just to get the artwork on the air, get these auctioneers on the air, and push the bids across the screen and move on to the next one as quick as possible.
This next piece is called Venus with Drawers, a very, very famous image of Salvador Dali. He actually later on created a sculpture about this piece as well. Wonderful, very colorful piece. It's signed and it's an artist proof, ladies and gentlemen, so good luck!
Bidding starts at a fraction of the artwork's actual value.
This should be going for 10 times this amount. But hey, it's your auction. 910 going once, 950.
It's an opportunity for every middle-class art lover, not just the upper crust, to invest in their very own masterwork.
Anytime you have a piece of art that starts off bidding at $1,000 that you're being told is worth $80,000 on the open market, that's too good to be true.
But for the nearly 10,000 bidders who think they're getting the deal of the century, their impression of fine offer. O'Brien will custom order reproductions directly from Finer Image Editions, and Christine Eubanks will faithfully manufacture them.
The light had come on, that this was now what we had been waiting for, a sign that things were going to turn around, that life was good.
Eubanks preys on O'Brien's artistic sensibility and gains his trust by saying quality is most important in the reproduction process. All he has to do is hand over an original.
And then this is just a sample that they showed him on a little piece of canvas to get his approval of how brilliant the color is, what it would feel like, the thickness of the canvas, the quality of the canvas. He was blown away because his work is so detailed and he's all about color. And he couldn't believe that the colors just jumped right out so brilliantly.
O'Brien takes the deal, And Christine Eubanks now has unlimited access to John O'Brien's original work, and she's seeing dollar signs in the reproductions.
Instead of just custom ordering for John, they wanted to be on the other end of it, which is let us go ahead and mass produce your work and we'll sell it and we'll pay you a royalty or a signature fee for every piece that you sign for us.
Eubanks promises O'Brien will join the big leagues and be in the company of millionaire artists like Thomas.
It's a week painting.
O'Brien is having modest success with his Irish landscapes and Parisian street scenes, and the City of Light holds special significance for him and his wife, Martha.
I met him in the summer of 1989 in Paris on a houseboat underneath the Eiffel Tower. It was just one of those moments that you're never expecting, and he wasn't either. It was just magical.
Martha, a ballet instructor, and her new husband barely eke out a living.
We were living not month to month, but it was tight. You know, we were living comfortable, but it was tight.
O'Brien soon catches a break when he lands an agent, and it's not long before licensing companies come calling. Soon his work begins to appear on puzzles, wall plaques, even oven mitts.
Things started picking up, and all of a sudden John was making money and he was getting recognized, and his artwork was getting into some very prominent homes.
Poster companies also approach O'Brien, but he's deathly afraid of losing control.
The puzzles he thought is a wonderful way to get his name out there and to get people interested in his work, and then maybe go to the website to buy an original painting or an authentic reproduction. But he didn't like the idea of his work being cheapened.
Eubanks knows that control is everything to an artist, and O'Brien is no exception. So she draws up an irresistible in Art Treasures Gallery is dead wrong.
There are a lot of people who are sitting at home in their living room looking at a fake piece of art and they don't even know it.
25, and this awesome piece is gone.
Fine Art Treasures Gallery is the magnum opus of Christine Eubanks, a serial entrepreneur based in Los Angeles. But long before the televised auction, Eubanks is just another yuppie hoping to make it big in showbiz.
Everyone described her as being somebody who was fairly intelligent. We heard things like she had an Ivy League education.
Eubanks grows up in Chicago, and after college, she moves to New York City to work for a movie studio's distribution arm.
She was always a competitive salesperson, at least the way she described it to me. She loved listening to the song Brick House in her car before she'd go to a sales meeting at that job.
The competitive saleswoman soon moves to Los Angeles, where she makes a turn from the movie business to fine art.
Christine would engage in fine art photography as a hobby, and she would meet other fine art photographers and learn about other techniques and skills. And somewhere down the line, she decided, okay, then let's make a business out of it.
Former Assistant U.S. Attorney David Willingham says she and her husband, Gerald